Hi, we're going to review for your quiz lessons 1.1 and 1.2 and 1.3. This will help you remember the information you need for your quiz. Absolute value is the distance a number is away from zero. For example, the absolute value of 5 is 5, and the absolute value of -5 is 5. So you can see by these arrows, the green arrow goes from 0 to -5, and the blue arrow goes from 0 to +5, and it's the same distance. So that's how you determine the absolute value. At the bottom of the screen, you can see that the absolute value is written like this. There's a vertical line, and then 5, and then another vertical line, and then that shows a +5 value. Absolute value is 5, and then a vertical line, -5 vertical line equals 5 also. So here's an example of a word problem that would be using absolute value. If a bird were flying 7 feet above the surface of the water, which would show the absolute value of +7, and a fish were swimming 7 feet below the surface of the water, which would show the absolute value of a -7. They are both 7 feet from the surface. The absolute value of each of them is 7. The surface of the water is the 0 mark. Okay, so if you're given a bunch of integers, some of which are absolute value, you will be asked might be asked to put them in order. We should think about the number line. So there's the number line. From the 0, the numbers go to the left. They get larger and larger in a negative fashion. And then from the 0 to the right, they get larger and larger positive. So the rule is, first you think about the numbers that are absolute value, and you have to remember that their value is positive. Put the highest negative values first, and then work towards 0, and then the lower to higher positive values. So at the bottom of the screen, you can see that the -5 would be first when you're putting them in order from lowest to highest, because the -5 would come on the on the left side of the number line, and then a higher value is -3, and then 1, and then the absolute value of -2, because you have to remember that that's actually +2, and then 4, and then the absolute value of 5, and then the absolute value of -6, because remember that the value of that would be +6. Okay, so then you were taught about adding integers. There are 3 boxes, kind of like 3 rules on this page, on this part of the chapter. When adding integers, if the signs are the same, add the absolute value of the numbers and use the same sign. So for example, 6 plus 7 is 13, which we've known for quite a long time if you think about it. And also -8 plus a -9 would equal a -17. So like you said, when the values are the same, you add them and then use the sign of the numbers in the answer. When adding integers, if the signs are different, You subtract the absolute value of the numbers and use the sign of the larger number. We talked about this and we wrote this in our notes also. So, for example, a negative 8 plus 5, those signs are different. You subtract the two values, which would be 3, and then it's negative 3 because 8 is the larger value. Just like 9 plus a negative 4, you would subtract the 4 from 9, and the answer would be 5, and it would be a positive 5 because the 9 is the larger of the two numbers. And one last rule, a negative number added to its opposite is 0. 13 plus a negative 13 is 0. Now, subtracting integers, there's this pretty simple rule with this one. When subtracting integers, you add the opposite of the second number. Then use the same rules for addition. So if you have a 3 minus a 12, the 3 stays the same. The 12 changes to a negative 12, and then you add it instead of subtracting 12. So it would be 3 plus a negative 12 equals 9. Equals negative 9. A negative 7 minus 4, what you would change is the 4 would become negative, and then you would add it. So it would be negative 7 plus a negative 4 equals a negative 11. Now the last example, you're subtracting, you have a negative 8 and you're subtracting a negative 13. The negative 13 becomes a positive 13, and then you add it. So a negative 8 plus 13 ends up to be 5, and it's a positive 5 because 13 is greater than 8, than the negative 8. Sometimes you're asked to find the range of something, meaning the amount that's the difference between the highest number and the lowest number. So at the top of the screen, when you're asked to find the range, you subtract the smallest number from the largest number. So you're given a bunch of numbers: 3, 7, 5, 10, 2, and 15. So the highest number in that example is 15, and the lowest number is 2. So you subtract the 2 from the 15, and you get 13. Now, in some cases, the smallest number is a negative number, and the largest number is a positive number. You have to think about this a little bit. You follow the same rule as above, and you subtract the smallest from the largest. Okay, now think about this. The numbers are 4, negative 5, 8, 3, 12, and negative 1. So out of all those numbers, the smallest number is a negative 5, and the largest is 12. So you're going to be subtracting the negative 5 from the 12. Now remember, when you're subtracting a negative number, you have to add its opposite. So it becomes 12 plus 5. So the range from negative 5 to 12 is 17. Sometimes you're given an example in a word problem, And one of the typical examples that they give is the elevation of land above and below sea level. The highest elevation in North America is 6,198 feet above sea level, which would be a positive 6,198. And the lowest elevation is 86 feet below sea level, so it would be a negative 86. So if you're finding the range of elevations or the difference between the highest and the lowest point, you're going to subtract that lowest elevation, which happens to be a negative number, from the highest elevation. So 6,198 minus a negative 86. Now remember, when you're subtracting a negative value, you're going to change that negative 86 to a positive 86, and then you're going to add it. 6,198 plus 86 is 6,284. So the difference between a mountain that's 6,198 feet tall and a valley that's actually below sea level by 86 feet, the difference ends up to be 6,284. And that's it. If you need to replay this lesson to get it in your head again, feel free to do that. I want you to do the checkup on the 1.3 section, and then I want you to go on to the quiz. If you still have some questions before the quiz, let me know. I'll see if I can answer them. I want you to do well, so try your hardest. Thanks.